Hey everyone, we're back with a new story and I hope you like it. Our channel is new and I really need your support. If this video reaches 1,000 likes, I'll share even stranger and longer stories. So please press like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Now let's start the story. This is the strangest story in Mexico, about a family descended from supernatural beings who settled in one of the most remote and rural villages in the country. What happened to this village was very terrifying and chilling. Let's begin. The story is about a very distant village in Mexico. This village was very peaceful and had no problems until one day a family moved close to the village. This family was known as the Carranza family, a very strange and unknown name. After the Carranza family moved in, the village turned into a nightmare. But how did the Carranza family settle in this village? One day the villagers woke up as usual and were surprised to find a large house made of clay near the village. They were very puzzled because this big house had not been there the day before. How could it have been built so quickly overnight without anyone noticing? The villagers were bewildered and their minds filled with questions. What was this house? How was it built so fast, and who lived in it? The village elders gathered and decided to go to the house to find out who lived there. The next day, 3 of the village elders went to the strange house and knocked on the wooden door. A child answered, but when he saw the villagers, he immediately sought refuge from the devil. The child who opened the door had a face that looked like a mix between a human and an animal, an unnatural and horrifying sight that instilled fear in their hearts despite the child's young age. The 3 men from the village were shocked and asked the child if he could call his father so they could talk to him. The child looked at them with an expression far from innocent and spoke, but what was astonishing was that his voice sounded like that of an old man. In a rough voice, the child said, "My father is not here. It's best for you to stay away from this house." Then he slammed the door shut with great force. They were puzzled by this and returned, amazed by what had happened. When night came, the villagers decided to keep an eye on this strange house. Strangely, the house was dark with no lights or any source of illumination. At midnight, they noticed glowing eyes staring at them from the windows, which terrified them. One villager decided to get closer to the house alone to investigate and listen to what was going on inside, despite the warnings from other villagers who advised him against approaching the house, especially at night, as it was clear that this family was dangerous. This brave villager made up his mind to get very close to the house. He approached cautiously and quietly, while the villagers watched from a distance. When he reached the house and stood next to the door to listen in, suddenly and without warning, the door opened quickly. An unknown long hand reached out and pulled the villager inside swiftly and frighteningly. They only heard his last scream before the door slammed shut and silence returned. The villagers were shocked and immediately went to their elders to inform them of what had happened so they could decide what to do. About an hour later, the villagers gathered and headed towards the Carranza house. As they were approaching, the villager who had tried to eavesdrop on the house earlier suddenly emerged. He was walking very heavily. When they got closer, they saw that his appearance had completely changed. His face had turned pale yellow and he was looking at them with a terrified and frightened expression, muttering to himself and trembling. They spoke to him and asked what had happened inside, but he seemed to be in another world, not paying attention or hearing them at all, as if he had gone mad. They took him home without him saying a word, and it seemed that he had seen something inside the Carranza house that he should not have, causing him a great shock. The villagers decided to stay away from the house that night. Suspecting that the Carranza family was not normal and might have connections to the other world, they believed that something supernatural was involved. The next day, they went to a spiritual elder in the village, known for his expertise in spirituality, the supernatural, and jinn. They asked him to go to the Carranza house to find out more about this family. The spiritual elder agreed to visit the family that night to check on them. When night fell, the spiritual elder went to the Carranza house while the villagers watched from a distance. Strangely, the Carranza family welcomed the spiritual elder into their home, where he stayed for an hour. After this time, the elder came out, looking shocked and pale. He told the villagers, "Listen to me very carefully. No one should ever try to approach the Carranza house. I risked my life going there and I never expected this. This family is of jinn descent, but this type of jinn is very dangerous due to their intermarriage with humans. They are not ordinary jinn, but rather very dangerous and powerful demons who do not want anyone from the village to disturb them. They said they will stay here for 2 months and then leave the area." That night passed without further incident, and all the villagers agreed to stay away from the Carranza family to avoid any trouble. The Carranza family never left their house. Days went by and the villagers began to notice strange things happening, especially at night. While sleeping, villagers would suddenly wake up to the sound of laughter, only to look out their windows and see a person with a distorted face staring back at them. Many villagers complained about being watched by the Carranza family at night. They also noticed that some of their food would disappear in the morning. One dark night, a villager named Carlos decided to fetch water from the well. As he approached the well and began filling his container, he noticed the water was unusually dark, reflecting something strange in its depths. Carlos leaned over the edge of the well to get a closer look. Suddenly, a very foul smell, like that of decomposition, rose from the well. He covered his nose and decided to shine his light down the well. To his horror, he saw a human corpse floating in the water, its face distorted and swollen as if it were about to burst, with its eyes wide open and turned white. Carlos was paralyzed with fear. Suddenly, the corpse began to move, and from beneath it, two black hands emerged, pulling the corpse back into the water, which quickly swallowed it. He saw red eyes staring back at him from the water's depths. Terrified, Carlos ran back to the village, shaken by what he had witnessed. In another incident, one of the village elders named Juan was sitting alone in his old house one quiet night, enjoying the silence. Suddenly, the lamp lighting his house went out, plunging the room into darkness. Juan relit the lamp and then heard footsteps coming from the upper floor, which had been abandoned for years and was supposed to be empty. Cautiously, he climbed the stairs with the lamp in his hand, his heart pounding with each step. The upper floor was dusty and filled with old, discarded items. In one corner, Juan noticed a very old doll the size of a small child sitting on a wooden chair. He hadn't seen this doll before. Suddenly, the doll began to move slowly, turning its head towards Juan, its empty eyes seemingly watching him. Terrified, Juan tried to back away, but his legs were frozen in place. The doll then spoke in a deep, eerie voice, saying, "You will not get rid of us." Before Juan could respond, he felt an intense cold grip his hand. Looking down, he saw the child from the Carranza family holding his hand, smiling. In a rough voice like that of an old man, the child said, "These are your final moments." Juan tried to pull his hand away, but the child's grip was unnaturally strong. Suddenly, the lamp in Juan's hand went out, and the room was plunged into darkness. He could hear laughter echoing from every corner of the upper floor, the doll and the child laughing loudly and menacingly. As the laughter grew louder, Juan's terror increased. Objects in the room began to move on their own, and the furniture shook violently. In his final moments of consciousness, Juan screamed loudly before feeling a sharp blow to his head, causing him to lose consciousness. After Juan woke up and regained consciousness, he found himself lying on the upper floor's dusty ground, with everything appearing normal. He saw the doll broken and lying on the floor. Determined not to remain silent about the Carranza family anymore, Juan, being one of the village elders, decided to take action, especially since the family had stayed beyond the 2-month period they had mentioned. The next morning, the villagers gathered and were surprised to find that the Carranza house had vanished. It seemed that after completing their 2-month stay, the Carranza family had finally left. With their departure, the village returned to its normal state, and all the strange occurrences ceased. Life in the village resumed its usual peaceful routine, although the villagers still harbored fears of the Carranza family's return. And so, the story ends here. Okay, everyone. We've reached the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed it and that it met your expectations. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already.